4 credit cards, 2 utility accounts, $23,400. I was 15 when they opened the first one, a Visa, with a $3,500 limit, applied for with my social security number while I was upstairs doing algebra homework. I didn't know about it. I didn't know about any of them. Not the store credit card that came a year later, not the electric bill in my name, not the gas account that kept our house warm through 2 Missouri winters while I slept in a bedroom I thought was free. I found out at 19. A landlord in Overland Park pulled my credit for a lease application and turned the screen toward me the way a doctor turns an x-ray when the news is bad. 412, that was my credit score. I didn't even know credit scores went that low. I thought mine would be blank, a clean page, no history, the way a 19-year-old's file should look. It wasn't blank. It was a wreck. I spent 5 years cleaning it up. $400 a month from a retail cashier paycheck that barely covered rent and gas. No vacations, no new clothes unless the old ones had holes that showed. Every month, I opened the credit card app, watched the balance drop by a number so small it almost didn't matter, and told myself it mattered anyway. 740. That's my score now. I check it every morning before I brush my teeth, open the app, wait for the number to load, exhale when it hasn't moved. Some people check the weather. I check the only number in my life that nobody else can touch. Or so I thought. My name is Rachel Dunning. I'm 27. I live in a 1-bedroom apartment in Westport, Kansas City, and I work as a loan officer at Heartland Credit Union on Main. The apartment is small, 680 square feet, if you're counting, and I always am. The kitchen counter came from a Habitat for Humanity restore. I sanded it down over a weekend, sealed it with polyurethane, and now it's the only surface in my home where I eat, work, and make every decision that matters. My couch is a yard sale rescue from Raytown, $40. Original upholstery that smelled like someone else's dog, recovered in a navy cotton I found at Joann Fabrics for $11 a yard. Everything in this apartment has a price I can trace. That's the point. I call it my clean file, the first space in my life where every line item is mine, where nothing was open behind my back, where the only name on the lease is the name I was born with and almost lost. In my bedroom closet, behind a winter coat I bought at Goodwill 3 years ago, there's a manila folder. It's thick, the kind of thick that means years. Inside are credit card statements I didn't sign, dispute letters I typed on a library computer at 20, a printout of a text message from my mother that says, "Don't be dramatic, Rachel. It's just numbers." I keep the folder the way some people keep fire insurance. Not because I expect the fire, because I've been burned before, and the scars taught me that evidence is the only language certain people understand. I don't open the folder often, maybe once a year, when something reminds me. A commercial about identity theft, a customer at the credit union with a wrecked file, and a story about a family member who borrowed their information. I pull the folder out, look at it, put it back. A ritual, like checking the locks before bed. I work with numbers for a living now, which my family thinks is funny in the way they find most things about me funny mildly, from a distance, without much curiosity about what the joke actually costs. At Heartland, I review loan applications, assess risk, calculate debt-to-income ratios. I'm good at it. My supervisor, Jeanette, says I have an instinct for reading a credit file the way some people read faces. I can see where the trouble started before the applicant can explain it. She doesn't know the instinct came from reading my own. My younger sister, Taylor, is 24. She works as a leasing agent at a property management company in Overland Park, posts Instagram stories about building her empire, and has 3,200 followers who think she's self-made. She has a nice apartment. She drives a car with insurance she believes she pays for. She went to a state college on a combination of scholarships and what our mother called family support. My mother is Stephanie Dunning, 53. Active on Facebook. Posts about gratitude, family dinners, and being blessed. Her profile picture is the two of us, me and Taylor, at last year's Easter brunch. In the photo, I'm smiling. I'm always smiling in her photos. It's easier than explaining why I wouldn't be. My father is Brian, 55, warehouse supervisor. Quiet in the way that people call easygoing when what they mean is absent. He doesn't manage the money. He doesn't manage much. When I asked him about the credit cards at 19, he said, "Your mother handles that stuff. Talk to her." I did. She told me not to be dramatic. 3 weeks ago, Taylor posted a video. She filmed it during a visit to my apartment, a visit I didn't invite her to. But that's Taylor. She shows up, she surveys, she narrates. She walked through my living room with her phone out, panning across the couch, the counter, the bookshelf I built from cinder blocks and pine boards. She added captions. My sister really said minimalism el meu. A zoom on my desk, the small one in the corner, where I do my online continuing education courses at night. This is what happens when you skip college. She posted it as a comedy reel. Mom commented, haha, so true. Dad added a laughing emoji, the one with the tears. Within 48 hours, 14,000 people had watched my sister walk through the life I built from a credit score of 412 and laugh at the size of the rooms. 14,000 strangers saw the couch I recovered with my own hands, the counter I sanded until my palms bled, the apartment I call my clean file, and my family, the people who dirtied the original typed haha and hit send. I watched it 6 times. Not because I'm a masochist, although there's probably a credit metaphor for that. Something about compounding interest on your own pain. I watched it because each time I caught something new. A detail Taylor had salted into the video that I missed on the first pass. The way you miss charges on a statement when you're scrolling too fast. The first time, I just heard the tone. Taylor's voice doing that half-laugh narration she uses on all her content. The one that says, I'm not being mean, I'm being relatable. The camera panning across my living room like a crime scene walkthrough. My books on the cinder block shelf. My kitchen counter. The recovered couch. The second time, I read the captions. My sister really said minimalism el meu. A slow zoom on my desk, the corner desk where I study for my certified credit counselor exam on Tuesday and Thursday nights. This is what happens when you skip college. A pause on my refrigerator, one magnet from the Kansas City Zoo, one from Heartland Credit Union's Employee Appreciation Day. Girl is collecting magnets instead of a 401k. The third time, I read the comments. Mom had written, haha, so true, with an exclamation point, like she was cheering at a game, not even a gentle haha, an enthusiastic one, the kind you type when you're genuinely entertained. Dad's laughing emoji sat right underneath it, and I stared at those 2 yellow tears rolling down that yellow face and tried to remember the last time my father had expressed any emotion about my life at all. He couldn't make it to my community college graduation because of a shift conflict he could have traded. But he found time to laugh at my apartment on the internet. The 4th, 5th, and 6th times I wasn't watching the video anymore. I was watching myself watch it, this strange distance opening up, like standing on a bridge and looking down at the current. 89, 83, 79. I counted and scrolled and counted and scrolled. And somewhere between the 5th and 6th viewing, the couch caught me. Not the couch in the video. The couch I was sitting on. The navy cotton. The yard sale frame. The fabric I cut and stapled on a Saturday afternoon with YouTube tutorials and a borrowed staple gun because I couldn't afford an upholsterer, because I couldn't afford much of anything, because at 19 years old, I was standing in a landlord's office in Overland Park watching a man in a polo shirt turn his computer screen toward me like a verdict. 412. That was the number on the screen. He didn't say anything for a few seconds, just let the number sit there between us, red and absolute. The way a failing grade sits on a report card. Then he said, I'm sorry, Miss Dunning, we can't approve the application with this score. I didn't understand. I'd never had a credit card, never bought anything on payment plans, never co-signed a thing. I was 19 and my financial history was supposed to be a blank page, the kind of clean file you start adult life with. Untouched, full of potential. Instead, there were 4 credit cards, 2 utility accounts, $23,400 of debt attached to a name I'd been carrying since the day I was born, used by the people who gave it to me before I was old enough to know it had value. I sat in my car in that landlord's parking lot for 40 minutes, the engine running, the heat on, my hands on the steering wheel at 10 and 2, like I was about to drive somewhere, but I didn't move. I called my mother. She picked up on the 3rd ring. I could hear Taylor in the background. She would have been 16, playing music, laughing about something. The sound of a household that functioned, the sound of a family that had warm air and electric lights and a working gas stove, all flowing through accounts with my name on them and my credit score underneath like a cracked foundation. Mom, there's $23,000 of debt on my credit report. Credit cards. Utility bills. I didn't open any of them. A pause. Then a laugh, short, nervous, the kind of laugh that sounds like a cough. Oh, honey, we were gonna pay those off. You know how things got tight after Dad's hours got cut. It was just we needed a bridge, that's all. Don't be dramatic, Rachel. It's just numbers. Just numbers. The same thing she said about my math award in 7th grade. It's just numbers, honey. Your sister made the dance team. Let's focus on that tonight. Just numbers. As if the numbers hadn't locked me out of an apartment, a future, a name that belonged to me. I spent the next 5 years on those numbers. $400 a month from a retail cashier job at a home goods store in the Zona Rosa shopping center. I lived in a shared house with 3 roommates. 2 of them had credit scores they'd never had to think about, and the third was 26 and rebuilding after a divorce. We ate a lot of rice. I learned to cook beans from dry because canned was 60 cents more. I disputed accounts on a library computer because I didn't own a laptop. And every month I opened the credit card app, watched the balances shrink by amounts so small they barely registered, and told myself that one day the numbers would be mine again, that one day my file would be clean, that one day I'd have a kitchen counter I chose and a couch I covered and an apartment where the only name on the lease was the one I'd earned back. I was 25 when I applied to Heartland Credit Union. My credit score was 680, not perfect, but human. Rebuilt. The woman who interviewed me was Jeanette Okafor, 44, former bank fraud investigator who downshifted to credit union work after 15 years of chasing people who did exactly what my parents did. She looked at my resume, looked at the gap between high school and the associate's degree, the 5 years of nothing that were actually 5 years of everything. She asked, "What happened between 18 and 23?" I told her the truth. Not all of it, just enough. My parents opened accounts in my name. I spent 5 years paying them off and rebuilding my credit. Jeanette leaned back in her chair, took off her glasses, looked at me the way I imagined she used to look at a case file that confirmed what she already suspected. "You rebuilt from 412?" she said. "Honey, I've been in banking 20 years and that's harder than most people's 4-year degrees." She hired me that afternoon. A year later, during a slow Tuesday at the office, I mentioned the identity theft again casually. The way you mention an old injury when the weather changes. Jeanette put her pen down and said something I wasn't ready to hear. "Rachel, if a customer walked into this office with that credit report, I'd tell them to file a police report. Family or not." She paused. "Theft is theft." I smiled, nodded, changed the subject, filed the sentence somewhere deep. The way you file a document you're not ready to use but can't bring yourself to shred. Have you ever found out that the people who were supposed to protect your name were the ones selling it? I have. And for 8 years, I decided the price of peace was silence. 3 weeks ago, my sister decided silence wasn't enough. She wanted 14,000 people to laugh too. Here's something they don't teach you in any credit counselor certification course. There's a difference between a wound that healed and a wound that's still bleeding, and you just stopped looking at it. I stopped looking 3 years ago. Paid off the last account, watched my score climb past 700, like watching a patient come off life support slow, fragile, miraculous in the most exhausting way possible. I told myself it was over. The file was clean. The past was the past. My parents hadn't opened anything new. They hadn't needed to. Taylor was out of the house by then. Dad's hours were steady. And I suppose $23,000 buys enough time for a family to pretend the theft never happened. I believed it was over the way you believe a toothache is gone because you stopped chewing on that side. 3 months before the video, I was at my desk at Heartland, running sample credit pulls routine training exercise for a new hire I was helping on board. I pulled my own file as a demo. Done it a dozen times. Clean pulls, no surprises. My 740 sitting right where I left it like a loyal dog on a porch. Except this time there was a line I'd never seen. Visa. Opened 12 years ago. Authorized user, Stephanie Dunning. Current balance, $4,118. Last activity, 9 days ago. A charge at a nail salon in Overland Park for $62. My hands went first, not shaking the opposite. They went still, locked flat against the desk the way they'd lock against a steering wheel in a skid, every tendon pulling tight, blood leaving the fingertips. Then my chest, a pressure behind the sternum. Not pain exactly. More like the feeling of something that had been floating suddenly sinking to the bottom. Then the thought, arriving last, the way thoughts always arrive after the body has already decided how to feel. They never stopped. 97, 89, 83. I counted and I breathed and I stared at that screen until the numbers stopped swimming. The new hire was asking me something about dispute resolution timelines. I answered her. My voice sounded fine. My voice always sounds fine. That's the trick you learn when you grow up in a house, where the most dangerous thing isn't the yelling, it's the quiet arithmetic your mother does behind your back. I didn't call Stephanie. Not that day. Not the next day. Not ever. Instead, I did what I've been trained to do. I screenshotted the account. I pulled the full statement history, 12 years of charges. Small ones mostly. The kind that slide under the radar if you're not looking. Groceries. Gas. A department store here. A restaurant there. A steady, modest siphon, like a slow leak in a pipe that doesn't flood the basement but rots the wood over years. $62 at a nail salon, 9 days ago, while my credit score sat at 740, and I checked it every morning like a prayer. My family has the worst interest rate of any account I've ever reviewed. High risk, no returns, and the penalties are criminal. Literally. That night I went home and pulled the folder from my closet, opened it on the kitchen counter, my restore counter, the one I sanded until my palms bled, and laid out 8 years of history next to 12 years of a credit card I didn't know existed. The folder had gotten thicker than I remembered. Documents yellow at the edges, dispute letters I typed when I was 20, full of typos and the kind of formal language you use when you're young and scared and trying to sound like you have a lawyer when you don't. I added the Visa screenshots, printed the full statement at the library the next morning, 53 pages double-sided, and slid them into the folder with the rest. And then I put the folder back in the closet, because I still wasn't ready. Because the lie was still louder than the math, but the math had changed. This wasn't history anymore. This was current, and current debt accrues interest in ways that old debt doesn't. It compounds, it grows, and eventually it comes due whether you're ready or not. It was during those 3 months between finding the visa and the video that I started remembering things about Taylor. Not the big things, the small ones, the ones that only add up when you lay them side by side, the way I lay credit entries on a spreadsheet. 2 years ago. Taylor needed a security deposit for her new apartment, the one she'd later post about on Instagram as proof of her independence. She asked me if I could help. I said yes. Started calculating what I could spare from the next 2 paychecks. Before I transferred anything, she called back, "Never mind, Mom handled it. Mom handled it." 3 words that meant nothing to me then and everything to me now. Mom handled it the way Mom always handles things, with someone else's name on the paperwork. Thanksgiving, a year and a half ago. Taylor showed up with new car keys dangling from a lanyard that said Boss Babe. She told the whole table she'd finally gotten her own insurance. Paying every bill myself, she said, and looked at me when she said it, not with cruelty, exactly, but with the specific satisfaction of someone who believes they've outperformed you at adulthood. Stephanie, across the table, caught my eye and looked away fast. A flick of the gaze, there and gone, like a cursor hovering over a file you don't want opened. I didn't understand then. I understand now. The insurance was paid, but not by Taylor, and not from any account that belonged to Stephanie either. It came from the same place everything in that family came from when the budget got tight and the math didn't work and someone needed a bridge. My name, my file. My 9 years of rebuilding used as a credit line for a family that laughed at the apartment I could barely afford because they were spending the difference. Taylor's Instagram bio reads, "Building my own empire, one lease at a time." She posted a story last month, a flat lay of her planner, a latte, and a candle with the caption, "Self-made looks good on me." Self-made. With her sister's stolen credit underneath like a foundation she never bothered to inspect. I closed the app, put my phone face down on the counter, and for the first time in 8 years, the folder in my closet stopped feeling like fire insurance. It started feeling like evidence. The algorithm didn't care about context. It just saw engagement. Friday evening, the video had 200 views, Taylor's usual crowd, the same 30 friends who like everything she posts, plus a trail of strangers the algorithm feeds to any content with enough momentum. By Saturday afternoon, after my mother added her comment and my father dropped his emoji, it jumped to 4,000. Something about family members publicly laughing at their own daughter gave the algorithm what it wanted, reaction. People clicking not because it was funny but because they needed to see if it was real. If a mother actually typed, "Haha, so true," under a video mocking her own child's home. By Sunday, 14,000. I know the exact number because I kept refreshing, the way you keep touching a bruise to check if it still hurts. It still hurt. Every time. My phone started buzzing with messages from people I hadn't talked to since high school. A girl I sat next to in sophomore English sent a screenshot with no comment, just the screenshot, which was its own kind of comment. A coworker from Heartland texted, "Is this your sister?" I replied with a thumbs up emoji, which is the credit industry equivalent of saying I am aware of the situation and will be handling it internally. But I wasn't handling it. I was sitting on my couch, the $40 couch, the one that now had 14,000 witnesses to its existence, refreshing the comments like pulling a thread on a sweater I couldn't stop unraveling. The comment section had split into two countries. Country 1 was laughing. "That couch though. Girl needs a Pinterest intervention. This is why you go to college, kids." They came in clusters, fast and shallow, the kind of comments people type without looking up from whatever else they're doing. Drive-by cruelty. I'd seen it 1,000 times on other people's content. It's different when the couch is yours. Country 2 was slower, quieter. The comments that took longer to type because the people writing them were choosing their words carefully. "Wait, her own family posted this?" And her mom commented, "Haha, this isn't content. This is cyberbullying with a family discount." The saddest part isn't the apartment. The saddest part is the mom laughing. And then, buried under 47 replies, a comment from a woman with a profile picture of a sunset and a username I'll never forget. @Marisol from Topeka. She didn't write a joke. She didn't write an opinion. She wrote a paragraph. My family did this to me too. Not the video, the dynamic. Being the one they laugh at because it's easier than seeing what you actually built. I don't know you, but I know this feeling. You deserve better than being their punchline. And your apartment looks like someone who takes care of what's hers. I read it 4 times, the same way I watched the video 6 times, except this time I wasn't cataloging damage. I was being seen. By a woman in Topeka I'd never met, who recognized something in a 40-second video that my own mother couldn't find in 27 years. Then my phone buzzed. Not a comment notification, a credit alert. I have my monitoring app set to push notify any charge over $50 on any account associated with my social security number. It's a reflex I built during the rebuild years, an alarm system wired into the part of my brain that never stops scanning for the next thing taken without asking. Stephanie Dunning, $340. Macy's. Overland Park. My mother was shopping at Macy's on a Visa card with my name on it on the same Sunday afternoon that 14,000 people were watching her laugh at the apartment I could barely afford. I set the phone down, picked it up, set it down again. 97, 89. I didn't count past 89. I didn't need to. Something had shifted, not a snap, not a break, more like a deadbolt sliding home. The kind of mechanical clarity that doesn't come with noise. It comes with the absence of noise. The last remaining question, are they doing this on purpose? Answering itself in a $340 charge at a department store while the video played and the comments rolled, and my mother typed, "haha," with the same fingers that signed my name on a credit application 12 years ago. I was still on the couch, the navy-covered $40, 14,000 times viewed couch. My phone on the cushion beside me, the credit alert still on the screen, Marisol's comment still in my head. A stranger in Topeka could see me. My own mother couldn't or wouldn't, and the difference between those two words had stopped mattering. I looked across the room. The closet door was open. I'd left it cracked that morning, reaching for a jacket. From where I sat, I could see the edge of the manila folder, peeking out from behind the winter coat like a spine on a shelf, patient and thick with years. 8 years of documents, 5 years of payments, 12 years of a credit card I didn't know about until 3 months ago, text messages, account statements, dispute letters typed on a library computer by a 20-year-old who couldn't afford a lawyer and didn't know she needed one. I'd been keeping that folder the way people keep emergency kits, tucked away, sealed, maintained but never opened, because opening it means the emergency is real. The emergency was real. It had always been real. I'd just been calling it family because that's what my mother taught me to call it, and I'd been a very good student. Was I saving that folder as protection? I thought. Or was I always waiting for permission to fight back? Marisol didn't give me permission. The comment section didn't give me permission. The $340 charge at Macy's didn't give me permission. Nobody gives you permission to stop being the punchline. You just stop laughing. I got off the couch, walked to the closet, pulled out the folder, carried it to the kitchen counter, my counter. The one I sanded. The one where every decision that matters gets made. I opened it. Not the way I'd opened it before carefully, like visiting an old grave. This time I opened it the way I open a loan file at work. With purpose. With a checklist forming in my head. With the part of my brain that reads credit histories and calculates risk and knows, professionally and personally, that the only thing worse than a debt unpaid is a debt unacknowledged. If you had that folder in your closet, 8 years of proof that the people who raised you stole the name they gave you, would you open it? Or would you let it sit there for another 8 years? Getting thicker? Getting heavier? While your family shopped on your credit and laughed at your apartment and typed, "ha ha," like it was the funniest thing they'd ever seen? I opened it. And I didn't put it back. Monday morning, I walked into Heartland at 8:15 with the folder in my bag. Not the whole bag of tote I usually carry to the farmer's market on Saturdays, canvas, nothing special. But that morning, it held 53 pages of Visa statements, 4 original credit card account openings with my social security number printed in boxes I never filled out, 7 years of dispute correspondence, and a screenshot of a text message from my mother that I'd kept on my phone since I was 19 years old. The tote weighed almost nothing, maybe 2 pounds. It was the heaviest thing I'd ever carried to work. I didn't go to Jeanette right away. I went to my desk, logged in, pulled up the standard fraud documentation template we use when a customer comes in with a compromised file, the form that asks for account numbers, dates of unauthorized activity, relationship to the perpetrator, and a timeline of discovery. I'd filled out dozens of these for other people, never for myself. I typed my own name in the first field, Rachel Dunning, date of birth, social security number, the same 9 digits that had been used to open accounts before I knew what a credit score was, relationship to perpetrator, mother, father, sister. I got through 8 fields before my hands stopped. Not from emotion, from the weight of how ordinary this form made it. Box by box, my family's crime looked exactly like every other identity theft case I'd processed at this desk. The only difference was that most of my customers cried when they told me. I wasn't crying. I was filling in boxes with the steady hand of someone who'd had 8 years to convert grief into data. Jeanette found me at lunch. She didn't ask what was wrong. Jeanette doesn't ask questions she can already answer. 20 years in fraud investigation trained that out of her. She sat down across from my desk, set her coffee next to mine, and said, "You've been too quiet today, and you're never quiet. You're the only loan officer I have who narrates her risk assessments out loud like a sports commentator." I almost laughed. Almost. Instead, I reached into the tote and pulled out the folder. "I need you to look at this," I said. Not as my supervisor. As someone who used to investigate people who did exactly this for a living. Jeanette opened the folder. She read the way she reads everything, fast at first, scanning for structure, then slow when something catches. I watched her eyes move across the account openings. The dates. My age at the time of each one, 15, 16, 17. The visa that was still active. The charge from 9 days ago. She closed the folder, took off her glasses, set them on the desk with the kind of deliberate precision that means the next thing she says has been weighed. "Rachel, this is not a family problem." She paused. "This is a federal crime. Identity theft of a minor, and the fact that the visa is still active means it's not historical, it's ongoing." I nodded. I'd known. Of course I'd known. I work in this building. I process these cases. I know the statutes and the sentencing guidelines and the difference between a misdemeanor and a felony. But knowing something professionally and hearing someone say it to your face about your own mother are 2 different balances on the same ledger, and until that moment I'd only been reading one column. "Honey," Jeanette said, and here her voice shifted from investigator to something warmer, something that sounded like the older sister I never had. "I've audited Ponzi schemes with better bookkeeping than your mother's credit card habit." I laughed. A real one. The first real laugh in 3 days, and it came out cracked and short, like a window that's been shut too long, finally letting air through. Jeanette gave me a name. Eleanor Voss, an attorney she'd worked with during her fraud investigation years, now in private practice specializing in financial crimes and identity theft. "She's not cheap," Jeanette said. "But she's the kind of lawyer who makes the other side's lawyer nervous, and that's the kind you want." I called Eleanor that afternoon from my car in the Heartland parking lot. She listened without interrupting for 11 minutes, I know, because I watched the call timer the way I watch credit balances, tracking every second as proof that something real was happening. Eleanor's assessment was precise. The historical accounts, the 4 credit cards and 2 utilities, from when I was a minor, those were complicated by time. Statutes of limitation in Missouri for identity theft vary, and some of those accounts had been closed for years. But the active Visa with 12 years of charges and a $340 purchase 9 days ago, that was current. Every new charge reset the clock. Every swipe of that card was a fresh act of fraud. Your mother's last shopping trip, Eleanor said, is your strongest piece of evidence. The irony isn't lost on me. She asked me to compile everything into a single organized file. Chronological, account openings first, then payment records, then correspondence, then the active card statements, then the text messages. She said she'd begin a formal filing once she reviewed the complete package. One more thing, she said before hanging up. Going public is your choice. The legal case stands regardless. But if you choose to share any of this publicly, make sure it's factual, make sure it's documented, and make sure you're ready for what comes after. Because once people see this, you can't unsee it for them. I spent that week building the file. Not at work at home, at my kitchen counter after hours. The same counter where I eat and study and make every decision that matters. I scanned the original account applications, the ones with my minor age social security number in boxes, filled out in my mother's handwriting. I organized the Visa statements by year, 12 years of charges that averaged $320 a month, totaling over $46,000 on an account I never opened. I screenshotted the text messages. My mother's "Don't be dramatic. Taylor's mom already handled it." A Thanksgiving group text where Stephanie wrote, "So grateful for my girls, my biggest blessings," with a heart emoji, posted 2 hours after charging $218 at Target on my credit. I put it all into a Google document. Not the full legal file that was Eleanor's territory. A summary. A timeline. Redacted account numbers, but enough digits to verify. Screenshots of the texts with names visible. A brief statement at the top that said nothing more than what happened, when, and to whom. I generated a shareable link, copied it, pasted it into my phone's notes app. And then I closed my laptop and sat at the counter in the quiet of my apartment, my clean file, my 680 square feet of proof that I could build something with my name on it that nobody else had touched. The link sat in my phone like a loaded document, ready to send, ready to be read. I wasn't ready. Not yet. But the folder was out of the closet, and I wasn't putting it back. Sunday night, 9:17. The apartment was quiet the way it always is on Sunday nights, no traffic on the Westport side streets, no music from the bar 2 blocks over, just the hum of the refrigerator and the soft click of my laptop fan spinning up because I'd been sitting at the kitchen counter for 40 minutes without moving. The video was still at 14,000. New comments had slowed to a trickle. Sunday night energy, people winding down, putting their phones away. The algorithm was losing interest. By Tuesday, it would be buried under whatever Taylor posted next. A latte. A motivational quote. A flat lay of her planner with the caption "New Week, New Energy," and a sparkle emoji. In 48 hours, 14,000 people would forget they ever watched my sister walk through my apartment and laugh. But I wouldn't forget. And neither would the Visa statement in Eleanor Voss's office, or the fraud documentation template with my family's names in the perpetrator field, or the folder that had lived in my closet for 8 years, and was now spread across the same counter where I eat breakfast every morning. The link was copied to my clipboard. The comment box under Taylor's video was open in a browser tab. The cursor blinked at me like a metronome, patient, steady, waiting for me to decide whether this was the measure where the song changed key or the one where it stopped altogether. I want to tell you I was calm, that the transformation was clean, meek Rachel dissolving into something sharper, smoother, final. But that's not how it happened. What happened was messier. What happened was that I sat at my counter with a link that could rearrange my entire family, and I thought about braids. My mother used to braid my hair before picture day. Every year, elementary through 8th grade, she'd stand behind me in the bathroom, her fingers quick and certain, pulling sections tight enough to hold but not tight enough to hurt. She hummed while she did it, not a song, just a sound, the kind of rhythm that comes from a body doing something it knows how to do without thinking. I'd watch her in the mirror, and her face in those moments was the closest thing to love I could point to and say, "There, that's what it looks like." My father taught me to ride a bike in the driveway of the house on Maple Street, the one with the gas bill in my name. He held the back of the seat and jogged beside me, his work boots slapping the concrete, and when he let go, he didn't tell me. I just kept pedaling and turned around, and he was standing 30 feet behind me with his hands on his knees, breathing hard, grinning. These are real memories. They happened. And they happened in the same house, by the same people, during the same years that my social security number was being typed into credit applications I'd never see until they destroyed my future. That's the part nobody tells you about family betrayal. It's not a clean file. It's not a ledger where the bad cancels the good or the good cancels the bad. It's both. Always both. The same hands that braided my hair signed my name on a visa application. The same man who taught me to balance on two wheels couldn't balance a budget without borrowing my identity. And the worst part isn't the contradiction. The worst part is that the love was real and the theft was also real, and I had to sit at my kitchen counter at 9:17 on a Sunday night and decide which truth was heavier. My hand moved toward the laptop screen. Not to type to close it. The way you close a book you're not sure you want to finish because you already know the ending will cost something you can't get back. 97. If I posted this link, people would read it. Not 14,000 people scrolling past a comedy reel, people who would click and read and do the math and understand that my mother committed a federal crime before I was old enough to drive. 89. If I posted this link, Stephanie Dunning's Facebook profile, the one with the gratitude posts and the blessed hashtags and the Easter brunch photo where I'm smiling because it's easier than explaining, would become evidence in a story she couldn't narrate away. 83. If I posted this link, my father would know that the bike lesson and the braids and the gas bill were all part of the same life, and that his daughter had kept the receipts for all of it. 79. My hand was on the screen, one finger on the edge of the laptop, ready to fold it shut, ready to put the link back in my phone's notes and the folder back in the closet and the silence back over everything, like a blanket over a fire that's already burned through the floor. Then my phone buzzed. A comment notification. Taylor had replied to someone in the thread, a person who'd written, "This is kind of mean, no?" Taylor's response, "LOL. She's in her minimalist era, relax. It's just jokes." I read it twice. The first time, I waited for the anger. It didn't come. The second time, I waited for the hurt. That didn't come either. What came instead was the sound of a lock turning not, a deadbolt slamming, not a door crashing open, but the quiet, mechanical sound of a thing clicking into its correct position after years of being forced into the wrong one. Taylor wasn't careless. Taylor wasn't ignorant. Taylor had sat at a Thanksgiving table and watched our mother glance away when the insurance came up. Taylor had said Mom already handled it with the ease of someone who'd been handled for her entire life and never once asked what it cost. Taylor posted a video mocking the apartment her sister could barely afford, and then called it just jokes, the same phrase, the same dismissal, the same small word my mother used when she called $23,000 just numbers. They weren't different. They were the same sentence, passed down like a family recipe. Minimize, dismiss, laugh, and when someone points at the damage, call them dramatic. The lie, the one I'd carried since I was 19, the one that said family debt is shared, this is what good daughters do, silence is the price of belonging, didn't break. It didn't shatter. It just became legible, like holding a document up to the light and finally reading the fine print you'd been ignoring because you were afraid of what it said. This isn't family. This is a system, and I'm the resource it runs on. I moved my hand from the screen to the keyboard. I typed one line. Since we're sharing, here's why the apartment is small. I pasted the link. I read it once. Didn't edit. Didn't add an explanation. Didn't soften it with context or cushion it with a disclaimer. 11 words and a URL. The most honest sentence I'd written in 27 years. I posted it. Then I closed the laptop. Not in anger, not in triumph. The way you close a file after the last entry has been made, and the numbers are finally correct. I washed my coffee mug. I turned off the kitchen light. I plugged my phone in on the nightstand and set it face down, screen against wood. Notifications muted. The whole bright, noisy world of 14,000 opinions pressed into silence against my IKEA side table. I went to bed, and for the first time in longer than I can calculate, and I calculate everything, I slept past my alarm. I woke up at 7:43 on a Monday, which is a thing that has never happened in the history of my employment at Heartland Credit Union. My alarm goes off at 6:15. I am at my desk by 7:45. I have not been late in 2.5 years, because when your name has been dragged through the credit system before you could vote, You develop a relationship with punctuality that borders on religious, but that Monday I slept, deep and blank and dreamless, the kind of sleep that arrives only when something heavy has been set down after being carried for a very long time. I turned my phone over. 53 missed calls. For a moment I just looked at the number the way you look at a balance. That doesn't make sense, checking the digits, counting the zeros, waiting for the screen to correct itself. 53. I scrolled. 12 from my mother. The first one came in at 10:41 the night before, 24 minutes after I posted. The last one came in at 6:18 this morning. 12 calls across 8 hours. Stephanie Dunning, who once told me that calling more than twice was desperate, had called 12 times. I thought about that word desperate and how it sounds different when it's your mother wearing it. 9 from my father. 9. My father, who communicates primarily through single-word texts about the weather. Cold today. Rain later. Wind. That's Brian Dunning's emotional vocabulary, 3-word forecasts, delivered once a day like a man rationing syllables. 9 calls from Brian meant the weather had changed in a way he couldn't describe, with a noun and an adjective. 6 from Taylor, which surprised me, because Taylor and I hadn't had a voluntary phone call since 2022, when she needed a co-signer for something and I said no. 6 calls meant Taylor had run out of people to perform for and was circling back to the one person she'd never considered an audience. The remaining 26 were numbers I didn't recognize. I didn't listen to the voicemails. Not yet. Instead, I opened the browser on my phone and went to Taylor's video. It was gone. Not the comments, the video. Taylor had deleted it sometime in the night, which is a bit like pulling the fire alarm after the building has already burned down. The comment section had migrated. People had screenshotted the video, the captions, my mother's haha, so true, and my father's laughing emoji, and reposted them alongside the link I'd dropped. The link that led to a timeline of account openings, visa statements, text message screenshots, and a chronology that started when I was 15 and hadn't stopped. The original post was dead, but the receipts were everywhere. 38,000 views across reposts. The link itself had been opened over 4,000 times. I refreshed and watched the number climb 4,200, 4,300, with the detached fascination of someone watching their own credit score rebuild in real time, except this time the numbers weren't mine. They were my family's. And they were going in the wrong direction. The comment sections on the reposts had organized themselves into something that looked less like a social media thread and more like a support group. Women, mostly older than me, mostly writing in full paragraphs with correct punctuation, sharing stories I recognized. My mother opened a credit card in my name when I was 14. My parents used my social security number for the electric bill. I didn't find out until I tried to buy a car at 21, and the dealer looked at me like I was a criminal. Story after story after story, each one different in the details, identical in the architecture, a parent, a child's name, a number that didn't belong to the person paying for it. One woman wrote, I thought I was the only one. I've been carrying this for 19 years and never told anyone because I didn't think people would believe a mother could do this to her own kid. 4,000 people had clicked my link, but I was reading the comments from people who recognized their own files in mine. Then I found Taylor's screenshot. Someone I never found out who had gone to Taylor's Instagram before she could clean it up and screenshotted 3 posts. The flat lay with the planner and the latte. Self-made looks good on me. The apartment tour she posted when she moved in. First place on my own. No help, just hustle. The car key photo with the Boss Babe lanyard. Finally adulting right. They'd placed the screenshots side by side with 3 items from my documentation. The security deposit charge on my visa, the insurance payment routed through the same card, and a cropped section of the account statement showing charges at the exact businesses Taylor had photographed for her self-made content. The caption on the repost was 5 words. Self-made with her sister's credit. Taylor had deleted her Instagram. Then, 47 minutes later, I know, because someone screenshotted the reactivation notification too, she turned it back on. Then, made it private. Then, according to a commenter who was apparently monitoring the situation with the dedication of a forensic accountant, she turned it off again. I would have laughed if it wasn't my sister. I almost laughed anyway. At 8:12, my phone buzzed with a text from Taylor. Not a call, a text, which meant she'd moved from panic to strategy, or at least her version of it. You had no right to do this. This was family business. 7 words. I read them 3 times. Not because they were complicated, because they were a confession disguised as a complaint. This was family business. Not "this isn't true." Not "I don't know what you're talking about." Family business. Meaning she knew there was business. Meaning she'd always known. Meaning every time she said mom handled it, and every time she posted self-made, and every time she walked through my apartment with a camera and laughed, she knew exactly what she was stepping over to get to the joke. I didn't reply. There was nothing to type that 7 words hadn't already said for me. At 9:30, Stephanie made her move. A Facebook post, public, carefully worded, the kind of statement that's been drafted and redrafted in the Notes app before being pasted into the status bar. I know the type. I've seen fraud defendants release similar statements through their attorneys, except Stephanie was her own attorney, and her courtroom was a Facebook feed with 311 friends. To our friends and community, some people choose to twist family matters for public attention. Our family is going through a difficult time, and we ask for privacy and prayers. We are a loving family, and the full truth is more complicated than any one person's version. Praying for healing for everyone involved. I read it twice. It was a masterwork of saying nothing while implying everything. Some people meaning me. Twist family matters meaning document federal crimes. More complicated meaning we had reasons. Praying for healing meaning please stop reading the receipts. The comments under Stephanie's post were the part I wasn't prepared for. Ma'am, your daughter posted the receipts. And the math. Praying for healing, maybe pray for a lawyer? She was 15. You opened credit cards in the name of a 15-year-old. This isn't a family matter. This is identity theft. Of a child. Stephanie disabled comments within the hour. Then, and this is the part that Jeanette would later call the most predictable move in the fraud playbook, she re-enabled them 2 hours later, apparently hoping the tide had turned. It had not turned. By noon, there were 114 comments under Stephanie's post. 11 of them were supportive. 103 of them were not. The ratio was so lopsided that a commenter had actually done the math. 90.4% of your own friends think you're wrong. That's a worse approval rating than most politicians. I closed the app, set my phone on the counter, and then I listened to one voicemail. Not my mother's, not my father's, not Taylor's. Number 27 of 53, a number I didn't recognize, with a Topeka area code. Hi, you don't know me. My name is Marisol. I found your link through the comments on that video. IA pause. A breath that shook slightly, the way a voice shakes when the words coming next have been carried a long time. My mother did the same thing to me, when I was 16. I'm 41 now, and I never told anyone because I thought it was just my family. You know? I thought I was the only one. Another pause. I just wanted you to know, you're not alone. And you're not wrong. The message ended. 38 seconds. I saved it. Deleted the other 52 notifications, every call from my mother, my father, my sister, and the 26 strangers whose numbers I'd never know. Deleted them all without listening. But Marisol's, I kept. Because Marisol didn't call to manage a crisis. She didn't call to control a narrative or protect an image or tell me I had no right. She called because she recognized something in a stranger's credit report that she'd been carrying alone for 25 years, and for 38 seconds she wasn't alone anymore. Neither was I. 3 months later, I moved. Not far, 6 miles east, still in Kansas City, still in a neighborhood where I can walk to a coffee shop and a library and a grocery store that stocks the dry beans I learned to cook when I was 20, and broke and rebuilding a credit score that belonged to me in name but not in practice. The new apartment is a 2-bedroom. The second bedroom has east-facing windows, and in the morning the light comes through at an angle that makes the room look like it was designed by someone who understood that space isn't about square footage, it's about what you choose to put in it. I'm turning that room into an office. A real one. Desk, lamp, bookshelf, not cinder blocks and pine boards this time, but an actual shelf I ordered online and assembled myself on a Saturday afternoon with a podcast playing and nobody filming it for content. The yard sale couch made the move. I recovered it again, 3rd time, in a fabric I actually chose instead of whatever was cheapest on the remnant table. A deep green, the color of something that grew slowly and isn't going anywhere. Eleanor Voss filed the case 6 weeks after I posted the link. The active visa is the centerpiece, 12 years of charges, the most recent ones timestamped just days before the video that made the whole thing public. Every swipe, Eleanor explained, constitutes a separate act of fraud. The $340 Macy's charge my mother made on the Sunday she was laughing at my apartment is, legally speaking, the freshest piece of evidence in a 12-year pattern. The irony doesn't need a credit metaphor. It speaks for itself. My score is 762 now. The disputed visa was formally removed from my credit report after Eleanor's filing triggered an investigation by the card issuer. 22 points. That's what 12 years of someone else's spending cost me on paper. The real cost isn't on any report, but the 22 points feel like finding a room in your house you didn't know existed, small, but yours, and clean. Jeanette recommended me for the fraud prevention team at Heartland. I started last month. The title is longer, the desk is bigger, and the work is the same thing I've been doing since I was 19, reading credit files and finding the places where someone else's signature doesn't match the name on the account. The difference is that now I do it for other people. And when a woman sits across from me with a wrecked file and a story about a family member who borrowed her information, I don't flinch, I don't judge. I pull out the documentation template and I say, let's start with the first account they opened. We'll go from there. Jeanette calls it field experience. Most fraud analysts train for years before they develop your instincts, she told me on my first day in the new role. Yours were just involuntary. She's not wrong, but I'm choosing this time. That's the difference that matters. The Dunning family, my family, though the word sits differently in my mouth now, lighter, like something I'm holding by choice instead of obligation, is quieter than it's ever been. Stephanie's Facebook has been silent for 6 weeks. No gratitude posts, no blessed hashtags, no Easter brunch photos with daughters smiling because it's easier than explaining. Her 311 friends saw the comments under her damage control post, and the math was louder than the prayers. I don't check her page. Jeanette told me not to, and Jeanette is usually right about the things that matter. Taylor lost her job. The property management company she worked for, the one where she leased apartments and collected security deposits from people who trusted her with their personal information, decided that an employee publicly associated with an identity theft case wasn't the best face for their brand. I don't know the details. I didn't ask. But there's something in the architecture of that consequence that doesn't need commentary. A woman who helped herself to her sister's credit, fired from a job that required other people's trust. The math does itself. Taylor hasn't texted since the 7 words. Neither have I. The silence between us isn't cold. It's just accurate. There's nothing left to say that the numbers haven't already said, and Taylor and I were never fluent in the same language anyway. My father sent a letter, handwritten, 3 pages. The paper was lined, torn from a legal pad, the kind they keep in the break room at the warehouse, and his handwriting slanted to the right the way it always does, like the words were leaning towards something they couldn't quite reach. He wrote about the night they opened the first card. November. I was 15. He said the electric bill was 3 months overdue, and the shut-off notice had come on a Tuesday, and Stephanie said, Rachel won't mind. She's the responsible one. She won't even know. He wrote that he didn't argue, that the bill was overdue and I was asleep upstairs, 15 years old, dreaming about whatever 15-year-olds dream about, and it seemed like such a small thing at the time. 1 card, 1 bill, 1 winter. He wrote that by the 2nd card, he knew it wasn't small anymore. And by the 3rd, he'd stopped counting not because he didn't care, but because counting meant seeing, and seeing meant choosing, and choosing meant standing in front of Stephanie and saying, this is wrong, in a voice loud enough to be heard over 20 years of not saying anything at all. The letter ended with 2 sentences. I know this doesn't fix it. I just wanted you to know I remember the night it started. I read it. All 3 pages. Twice. I haven't replied. Not because I'm angry, though some mornings I still am. In the quiet way that doesn't burn but settles, like sediment after a long rain. I haven't replied, because there's nothing I can write on a piece of paper that would undo a November night when I was 15 and asleep and my name was already being spent. Some debts don't have a payment plan. They just exist, and acknowledging them is the closest thing to settling the account that either of us will get. I keep the letter in my desk drawer, not in the folder. The folder is with Eleanor now, and it belongs to the legal system. The letter belongs to something else, something smaller and sadder and more human than any court can process. This morning, I poured my coffee and sat at the counter in the new apartment. Not the restore counter, a new one, butcher block, installed by the landlord before I moved in. Someone else sanded this one. I'm okay with that. Not everything has to be rebuilt from raw material. Some things can just be ready. The sun came through the east window and hit the wall in a way that made the room look bigger than its measurements. My phone was on the counter, silent. Not because nobody was calling, but because the people in my life now text first and ask if it's a good time. That's the difference. That's the whole difference between a family that uses your name and a life where your name is your own. I picked up my phone, opened the credit score app. 762. The number sat on the screen, green and steady, like a pulse. I looked at it, closed the app. For the first time in 8 years, I didn't need to check again tomorrow. What does it mean to have good credit when the people who gave you your name are the ones who ruined it? And what does it mean to rebuild not the score, but the belief that your name is yours? I'm still working on the second question, but the first one, I can answer. It means the file is clean. It means every line is mine. It means I'm 27 years old, sitting in a 2-bedroom apartment in Kansas City with east-facing windows and a green couch, and a credit score I earned back one $400 payment at a time. 762. I might check again tomorrow. Not out of fear, just because it's mine.